Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome in. We are back with another commentary for the Summer of Arcade 2023. This time it's going to be Shock Troopers Second Squad. So I have never played this game before, and I did not expect to love this game as much as I did. I had gotten it out of a box full of cartridges back when there was a sale going on after the movie theater had closed, and so when I had gotten it, the cartridge was actually beaten to high hell. It was like heavily damaged, and then the previous owner told me that the cartridge itself no longer worked. So I said, that's weird. I decided to take it home anyways. And so with me, nothing in my house ever really stays broken. And if it is broken, it doesn't stay broken for long. So it turned out that it had a torn contact and stuff, and a little bit of soldering actually fixed it. So I went ahead and I was like, okay, well, let's see if we can actually get the game off of there, and have it carried over to the Macintosh. That way I can see if I can load it up into an emulator, and so I went ahead, got it ripped, and I had started playing it. I didn't expect to enjoy this game as much as I did. Over the course of doing the Summer of Arcade special, I had like a lot of games that I played, and like I was okay with them for the most part. I was like, hey, these are fun, but they weren't like, I can't put this down kind of fun. And so with Second Squad, I just kind of sat there and I was like, this is actually really, really fun. It kind of reminds me of Ikari Warriors a little bit, and everything is just very light and very kind of fluffy to a certain extent with its theming. It doesn't really take itself too seriously. It basically wants to go Rambo without actually going and being Rambo or having the serious themes of Rambo, and I really, really like that, I think. I enjoyed the wide cast of characters. Long after this video was shot, I continued playing the game as all the characters and stuff, and they all feel really, really good, and they're super fun to play. I like how you have like little vehicles that you can drive around in and stuff. Like I did not expect to enjoy this game as much as I did, and I was actually really shocked by that because I was like, I'm only supposed to be playing these once, maybe twice, and that's pretty much it. I'll go ahead and store the cartridges in case I need them again, or maybe I'll give them away, and then of course I'll go ahead and keep the backup and stuff. And well, with this one, I was just like, I just can't really put this down. It kind of became a common staple. So I never saw this game growing up at all, but it's definitely one of SNK's better games, I think. And I've had an amazing time with it. It's pretty much the same stuff that you would expect to see out of every SNK game, weapon upgrades, really lovely, that speech impediment, really lovely, beautiful visuals, and just everything's here, like even some of the explosion animations are really, really nice and stuff. Like it just feels really, really good. And then, of course, this was around that time where SNK was starting to really embrace that manga-esque art style that they're pretty much known for. Like, they weren't really shooting for realism or anything, so they have, like, this lovely, like, animated art style that I just really, really appreciate, I think. But, as with all of the good points, there were a couple of bad things that happened when I was actually going and attempting to film this. So this was the first game I had filmed where I had started running into the limitations of Android 10. So with Android 10, basically it had no real way to go and do screen recording outside of the app. And then even if you did have like a screen recorder, the limitation for it would only be about 4 gigs. That was the limitation that the operating system at the time had. And so with this being filmed on the AYN Odin and stuff, I was very much so painfully aware of the limitations of the current version of Android that I was running. And with the hardware on the Odin being a little bit on the older side in terms of the gold chipset that it uses and everything else, I don't really think it can really go past Android 10. So when I got around to filming, I was like, okay, well, screen recording is not natively built into this. And so the main issue that we have is like, okay, well, how do I go and I film this game? And so I went through a bunch of apps, and I wasn't really satisfied with a lot of them. I finally settled on AZ Recorder. There was another recorder that I was using called X Recorder, and the cool thing about it was that when you had reached your limit for your size, it would automatically start up another recording right then and there to pick up where you left off. But I found that it would cause the game to crash, it would make the entire OS unstable. It just wasn't really that great. So one of the limitations that I had to work around, I think, with recording on Android is I literally have to go and pick short form games, or I have to learn when to stop the recording, because what'll happen is if I don't go and manually stop it, it'll stop on its own, most of the time in a very inconvenient spot, and then I have to go and race to go and set up the recording and have it start recording again. And so for longer games, this kind of poses a challenge. So with Second Squad here, my first couple of runs, what wound up happening essentially was I was reaching the end of the recording capacity. This is back when I was trying to do 1080p and stuff, and because 1080p eats up a 4 gig file very, very quickly. And so I had to go in, and to fix it I had to set it to 720p, set it to 60 frames all the time, and then I set everything else to automatic. And when I had set it to automatic, it pretty much fixed the issue. Like, basically what I was trying to do is go for 60 frames with like a maxed out bitrate and, you know, just like all this other stuff, thinking that I could beat the game in time to not really have to worry about that particular set of issues. So I just kind of said to myself, okay, you know, well, we're going to go ahead and try filming this again. First time I had filmed it, I had gotten all the way to the end of it, and since I was going and running maxed out settings, that 4 gig cap really came back to bite me in the ass. You know, like, it just turned around and fucking sank its teeth right into me, and so my first run of this was actually going really well, and then I had to go and reshoot the entire damn thing because I was grossly unaware of how bad the size restraint would literally come back to haunt me. And so I had set it up to auto and stuff, and I had gone and recorded it again, and it turned out a lot better. You know, the end result is the recording that you see here, you know. Everything looks good, or at least I feel everything looks good. You know, the game still looks grainy in some areas, but there was only so much I could do with it, because it's a pretty old game. You know, like, even back then, you know, a lot of games were still pretty grainy and stuff, and even on arcade there wasn't really any sort of middle area where you could go and have like stunning visuals and then have stunning sequences on top of it for like post-game and things like that. So some sequences looked really good, others looked really bad. You know, I had to do a double take and check, you know, to make sure it wasn't the emulation. No, it's just the game. So I played the hell out of this and I enjoyed it. I finally got the recording in the door. This one is about an average size game with an average time attached to it. It took me about 45 minutes to beat it from start to finish, and then of course there's going to be a couple of minutes missing off of this because I went ahead and, like normal, I have a tendency to chop the sides off, you know. But with Second Squad, I think that it's just one of those games that doesn't really take itself too seriously. It kind of revels in its goofiness a little bit. I like the wide variety of weapons that the game itself has. Not all of them are bangers, you know, like the one I'm using currently I didn't really care for too much. You know, I would have rather just had the standard assault rifle at that point, but for the most part the rest of the weapons are actually really, really fun to use. And so I found myself really going, and the more I played it, the more I kind of wished that I had a second player for it. Like, around this time, my godson was like, hey, you know, I can see that you're enjoying it, I really just don't want to go and take that from you, you know, but I really wish that I could have brought a second player with me, because this would have just been a straight up banger with two people, you know. It would have just been like a hell of an experience, and it's so much fun as a single player, but I think that having like a co-pilot with you would have just been an amazing experience and stuff, and I think it would have amplified the fun greatly, you know. So there was like a couple of other issues with the recording back when I was going and recording this. I had just swapped over to AZ Recorder, got rid of X Recorder, and I was saying to myself, okay, we're going and running custom settings, and so the first time on AZ Recorder, I was struggling with the fact that, for some weird reason, some games just did not want to go and record audio correctly, like at all. Like, they just didn't want to do it. And so I would go and I would check my audio settings and I would be like, okay, this is where we're at, more or less, yada, yada, yada. And I would double check, triple check, and it had boiled down to like a setting in RetroArch. And so with RetroArch, a lot of it works right out of the box. Like RetroArch, you don't really have to do a lot of tweaking and tuning with some cores, which is really nice. You just have to get your base settings set up and, you're practically out the door at that point. But some games within RetroArch, I find that you just have to go and tweak them and tune them a little bit. I had to actually go and screw around with the sound sampling for this game because when I would adjust the sound, a lot of the times it would either speed or slow, or well, speed up or slow the game down. And so I would have to go in the Funnel Burn Neo Core and just tweak it and tune it and tweak it and tune it. And I think I was probably fucking around with it for damn close to 2 hours, plus going and doing test recordings to see if like that fuzzy and glitchiness was still there before I could actually get a nice solid recording the way that I wanted it and stuff. As always, I didn't bother to do any sort of overclocking with the settings whatsoever, so the game still has its fair share of slowdown, and this game was really beating the shit, I think, out of the hardware in the arcade cabinet at the time and stuff, as a lot of SNK's games had a tendency to do. It's like the fun for the games was there, but I found that the hardware, it was kind of lacking. But to be fair, the hardware wasn't much. It was essentially just kind of like a souped up Sega Genesis, like a little bit of a higher spec of it. I mean, they were capable of pumping out beautiful visuals with it and stuff. It's not a bad looking game, but I think if the hardware was a little bit better, they could have mitigated a lot of these frame rate issues and stuff. And so I have a tendency to just leave the frame rate issues in because it makes it feel a little bit more authentic. I know a lot of people like to go and just go and fix that to where the frame rate's really stable and stuff, but I've never really cared for it. I feel like it kind of robs it a little bit, So I had to go and, as a consequence of like having to fuck around with everything, I had to go and tweak and tune a lot of stuff, and like I got the game running, and it runs really, really beautifully. I basically have it running in a almost flawless fashion, but just the audio just kept coming back to bite me, and then it would also, the audio would also have issues if I connected something via Bluetooth. Like if I was going and recording and say I just wanted to have a nice sound quality and like I'd go and connect it to like a Bluetooth speaker or something, it would give it fits as well. And so I think out of the entire time that I was recording it with this game, even though it's really fun, even though I still play it, I found that the entire tweaking and tuning period was relatively painful. Like I didn't really care for it. I know it's going to happen with emulation, like not every game. With emulation, some games are going to need to be tweaked and tuned. Other games won't even just run at all. Like, emulation is not a magic bullet that you can just go and fire and just play your old games again. Sometimes you gotta play around with the settings a little bit to get it to where it needs to be, and then with Second Squad, it was very much so the case, between the audio, and then for some reason I had to do like a little bit of tweaking as well because the beginning areas were like really glitchy. And so it was just a lot of going through and fixing everything, and it was out of all of the games that we have in this collection, this is the one that gave me like the most grief. Like I had other games that gave me like a little bit of bullshit as well, but it wasn't quite as bad as this. But there's a certain level of satisfaction I think that hits when you go and you realize, oh, okay, I'm going to have to fix this crap just to play it. And then you get it to a point where it's like nice and perfect. And it feels so good, because it's going to be running flawlessly. So you go, yeah, I have everything where I want it. I can just go keep these settings and then boot it up and play it whenever I want it. So I think that with Shock Troopers, it was basically a labor of love past a certain point because the cartridge was damaged. I had to go repair the cartridge, and then I had to pull the pull the file off of it, and then go and load it into an emulator, then tweak and tune the emulator to get it to run correctly. And it was, I think with Shock Troopers, it was just kind of one thing after another, and there was a couple of nights where I was just kind of sitting here. I would be sitting back sucking down some tea, right, and I would just kind of say to myself, oh, do I really want to do this? Like I would find myself asking if I wanted to actually go and continue working on it. after a while, because like you kind of, I think when you spend so much time on something, you just kind of say to yourself, is it worth it? You know, with Shock Troopers, it was like, okay, well, we had the first hurdle, which was repairing the cartridge. Okay, that's fine, works great. And then we had the second hurdle, which was like the audio, and it's like, okay, that's fine. And then the third hurdle was the video, and it's like, okay, that's also fine. And then going and trying to get it to record correctly was another hurdle, and it's like, all right, you know, we're here, we're doing it. So with Shock Troopers, I thought that it was just one of those things where I remember kind of sitting back. I think it had taken me, this game is only like 45 minutes long, and I had been working on it for almost a week straight. And to be fair, the only reason I really kept working on it is because I really enjoyed the game. Like, the game is just that fun, and I just wanted to share it with people, you know? So I remember sitting back some evenings, and like I would have like a thing of tea in my hand. Then most of the time when I go and I work on video editing, I always carry like a small thing of food with me off to the side. And that's because when I go into editing mode, I just want to go and keep working on it until I'm done. And as a consequence of this, I have a tendency to forget that I need food and water. You know, like I kind of get this hyper focus past a certain point, and it's just like, okay, I'm just going to keep working on it until it's exactly right where I want it. And so I think that Second Squad kind of suffered that the worst out of all of the videos, because with all the other videos, their editing processes were very, very like smooth compared to Second Squad. But with Second Squad, it was just one thing after another, after another, after another, and so it was actually quite the journey. Second Squad took the longest to film out of all the games. All of the other games really took to Final Burn Neo very, very easily, and they run beautifully. But with Second Squad, it was just, for some reason, it was just having these widespread compatibility issues, and it just was propping up every 5 seconds. And then I had another problem with RetroArch about halfway through, where RetroArch decided it just wanted to randomly take a ship out of nowhere, and I was like, God, dude, you know, this is my life, more or less. And so I had, about halfway through the entire journey, I had to literally go reinstall RetroArch, which uninstalling RetroArch when you literally have like 900 games loaded into it is a fucking nightmare, because you have to go re-download all the cores. That's easy, but you have to go and tweak and tune everything again. And like going and saving the configuration file and stuff is great, but you still have to set up those cores, you know. So I was really close to quitting, recording this, when all this crap kind of started flopping downhill. I'd gotten to the point with it where I was like, you know, this is some bullshit. It's not something I really get to say too often, you know, because I don't really like to quit on much of anything. You know, I kind of like to see it out until like the bitter end and all that jazz. But with Shock Troopers, I was just kind of sitting here going, okay, you know, I've had to do this and this and this and this and this and all this other stuff. And, you know, you just kind of sit there and you wonder after a while, you know, is this worth it? You know, am I just kind of maybe failing a little too hard with it, you know, but am I being stubborn about it? You know, because you're having all these issues, but you're kind of saying to yourself, okay, I don't want to give up on this. We're going to keep doing this crap anyways, yada yada. And so when I had gotten to the end of the recording, I literally kind of keeled over a little bit. Like, I'd been working on it for a week straight. And as always, these videos are just done by me. Like, I don't have like any sort of editing team or anything in the background, so all of the work is literally just solely done by me, and it gets kind of exhaustive after a while, you know. Like a lot of people, I think, it's kind of weird on YouTube, because a lot of people are like, oh, this person can pump out these high quality videos so fast, and what they don't realize is a lot of the time they have people helping them. It's not such a clear-cut case of, oh, you know, they're releasing it, you know, really, really fast and stuff. They must be working really fast. No, a lot of the time people actually have other people that help them and stuff. And some of the bigger YouTubers have full-blown production teams that help with that as well. Whereas with me, the reason why it takes so long sometimes is because I go and I do it solo, which, you know, I don't mind doing it solo, but it can be very exhausting at times. And it can be very, very time consuming as well. And so with Second Squad, I just kind of, the night that I had finished it, I sat down and I said, fucking hell, it's over. Like, I don't really, there's not too many projects I work on where when I get to the finish line, I kind of say to myself, oh man, thank fuck that's done. It's just not something that really happens. I don't think, like most of the time when I work on projects and I get to the end, I kind of say to myself, okay, that was cool, let's do that again. That's how I have a tendency to go and look at it. But with Shock Troopers, I'd gotten to the end. I remember watching the credits roll after going and wrapping the recording up. And the first words out of my mouth were, thank fuck. Just thank fuck, And I remember my fiance was kind of looking at me at the time, and she's like, are you okay? And I said, yes, I am fine. She's like, why do you do it if you appear to hate it? And I said, I do not hate it. I hate how much grief this damn game gave me, but I don't hate making videos. And so she just kind of looked at me. She was standing in the doorway, and she's like, I will never understand your work ethic, and I just kind of sat there and I laughed, but there was like this sweet sense of relief because from the time I had received this damn cartridge all the way up to when the credits rolled and the recording was done, it was just kind of like a straight struggle bus. And, I can't even really say I struggle busted the entire time when I was doing the PlayStation line. PlayStation emulation's actually really, really buttery smooth for the most part. But some of these SNK games, oh Jesus Christ, like there's literally, like you'd have to fuck around on MAME a little bit. Sometimes you would have to goof off and go to RetroArch and load up the Final Burn Neo Core. Like it was just kind of like a hell of a thing. And I remember going through and trying out different cores trying to get this damn game running correctly. And then finally, once I had settled on a core, it was like, okay, we gotta tweak it and tune it until it's perfect. And this is the only game I think that I have filmed up until this point where I just kind of sat there and said, this is just kind of excessive, but once it was over, I was like, I'm really glad that I did that. I'm really glad that I didn't quit on it. And so I just thought it was one of those things. I kind of laughed a little bit, and I remember my fiance just kind of sitting there looking at me, and she goes, well, how do you feel? And I remember just kind of looking over at her, and I was like, relieved. Like, literally, I feel relieved. It is okay. It's right where it needs to be and stuff. And, so when I was going through the editing process, going back and, like, looking at a lot of the footage and stuff, I was just kind of like, yeah, this is worth it. It's not, like, most of the time when I have projects, I automatically think it's worth it, but sometimes I have sometimes I have, like, some projects that are so brutal in how they have to be done where, like, they'll have so many issues that by the time I finally get it around to a serviceable state to, like, the standard that I want it to have, I kind of look at it, you kind of stop sweating a little bit, and then you're like, yeah, this is worth it. Would I do it again? No, probably not. Well, okay, that's a lie. I would do it again if I got to keep the prior knowledge. If I had to go and struggle bus it again without any sort of experience, I think that I would probably just quit out of frustration. But if I had to go and refilm this again, if I had to go and run it again for the first time while retaining old knowledge, I think that I would probably do it. I would most likely do it. And it's funny too because this is my second to the last video that I have to do for the commentary line, and looking back at it now, just kind of sitting here watching this gameplay, and just kind of going through and watching myself go through the levels and stuff, it kind of makes me smile a little bit because I kind of believe that challenges are a lot like mountains, essentially, and mountains are meant to be climbed, So, like with this video, in many ways, I kind of felt like I was at the bottom of the mountain, just kind of struggle busting it, and then you kind of look up and you see, oh, hey, there's a peak there, and you kind of say to yourself, God damn, that's a really tall peak. I don't think I'm going to be able to reach that. And so I've always been like a really huge fan of like going and climbing mountains and hills and everything else. Like I enjoy getting to the top. I enjoy persevering to a certain extent. So a lot of the time when I would go and experience difficulties with this game, I would literally kind of have to go and adopt the challenge accepted mentality a fair bit. You know, I would have to be like, okay, we're going to be doing this now, and then proceed to go out and do it, because I found that if I questioned it too much, I would want to quit on it, you know. And so like sometimes I've just learned to not question the process at all, and then just kind of harbor the mentality of if we can, we do, you know. And so I think that's really what kind of got me through this game. I mean, the game is fun, but the process was brutal. And so it was just kind of a hell of a thing, and it was definitely one of the more grislier experiences I think that I had while going and playing it and stuff and recording it. I mean, in some aspects, I guess I'm kind of grateful for shit hitting the fan, because you only really get experience from having to deal with it, right? And then for me, RetroArch at the time was a brand new experience as well. I was so used to using standalone emulators for everything. And then everybody that I was talking to was like, hey, you know, if you want, you can have all your shit in one place with RetroArch. You know, and then RetroArch also makes it a lot more accessible on Android to boot. So, I mean, Android has a lot of software, but if I wanted to take emulation super seriously, I'd have to do it on a Windows platform, I feel. So with Android, a lot of the bridging of the various gaps literally revolved around RetroArch, because a lot of the time, like, RetroArch was like, hey, you know, we're only going to show you cores that you can use on your platform. We're not going to show you cores that you can't use. So I think a lot of the time with using RetroArch, it was a blessing and a curse. On one end, RetroArch can be incredibly unstable sometimes on Android, but on the other end, it's actually really nice, because a lot of the time, if I would have to go and download a core, I wouldn't have to wonder, oh, is this only for Android or whatever. I wouldn't have to like pick and choose or guess, or you know what I mean? Like I would literally have to just say, hey, all of these cores are going to work on Android. They're all going to have varying degrees of functionality that I'm going to have to worry about. And so it was really, really liberating to be like, okay, well, if I can't go and get it to function on this core, that's fine. There's other cores I can use. And so it was actually kind of nice to have things failing to a certain extent, because on one end, it's incredibly frustrating, right? Like, you kind of just sit there and, like, you want your stuff to work right off the bat, you know, because we're creatures of comfort and we kind of believe that things should be like that. But on the other end, it's like, it's a good thing when shit fails, because if things constantly go right, you know, like if you never really experience any challenge, you're never going to learn anything, you know? So I'm actually kind of grateful when shit kind of falls apart, because it forces me to learn more about the platform that I'm working on. And so with RetroArch, it was plagued with a lot of issues as well, you know, and then sometimes the interface is kind of convoluted, but when you go and you get used to going and navigating around with it and stuff, especially using the XMB dashboard, you know, it's actually really, really nice. I know a lot of people like to go and use Ozone and stuff, but Ozone's never really been my thing. XMB is really familiar. It has like that PlayStation 3 dashboard flavoring and stuff, so I find that it's a lot easier to navigate around, especially when you're on like a mobile platform and stuff. I probably would not use it if I was on PC or something. I'd probably pick a different interface entirely, but you know, it gets it done, more or less. So with Shock Troopers, I just kind of, it wasn't so much just me filming the game, I don't think. It was literally me having to learn a whole bunch of stuff. And the cool thing is now with other SNK games, if I run across another one that is like failing, well, I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's failing, but if I run across one that has compatibility issues and stuff, I literally can just sit there and be like, okay, you know, most of these games are pretty similar, you know, let's go ahead and try this, this, and this to see if we can get it working. And so now that I have knowledge, I can sit there and be like, okay, well, let's check to see if any of this crap works. And then, you know, if none of it works, you can go and experiment, and then if experimentation fails, you can reach out on the internet to see if you can get a hand with it. So that was really, I think, the process with RetroArch in general. you know, just like running various games on it, including this one. It was definitely a process, and I'm glad that it happened. You know, I can't really complain too much.
Crush the ambition of Dio.
Ah, here we are, almost at the end already. Good stuffs. But yeah, like once I got everything rolling and where it needed to be, like I couldn't really put the game down. I would just go and just tear this crap up. It was, between me and my friends, it was like a long kind of standing joke for a while where it's like, oh yes, Rayman is going to literally do a different run of Shock Troopers with every character, and that's going to be the entire summer special. And I kind of laughed a little bit, you know, I was like, alright guys, alright, you know, you can stop busting my balls now. And so, it was just kind of funny though, because the game's good. You know, I really wish that SNK would have done more titles like this. And I'm pretty sure that if I would have been playing this back in the 90s, if we would have had an arcade cabinet that I would have discovered that had this game, I'm pretty sure I would have never stopped playing it. Like, literally, I'm pretty sure that I would have lost so much goddamn cash to that cab. Oh man, I would have been broke 24/7 just playing this damn game, and I still like to play it on the road and stuff, you know, like I'll take it with me and I'll find myself playing it on the way to doctor's appointments and stuff and everything else, and it's definitely one of SNK's winners, and I'd love to see a revival of it. I really would. I think that I would just enjoy that so much. I like how I'm just kind of stomping around in this little mech here. It's giving me some strong Ed 209 vibes. I think in many ways I kind of miss how games used to be goofy. Like, I miss it a lot, I think, because I feel like games are kind of inherently taken super seriously now. You know, they gotta make X amount of money, they've gotta meet every demand of, like, the fan base, they gotta do this, they gotta do that, and I just kind of miss silly stuff like this. Like, I just totally loved how when we first entered this section of the level, and you're in the mech, everybody just kind of shits their pants, you know, and I just really wish that gaming wasn't as serious as it is these days. I think that being super serious with gaming is really going to lead to its detriment. I mean, how many games do you know, that literally have soldiers literally rolling into combat and doing front flips and back flips and everything else? You know, I hate to admit, I actually kind of hated this level a little bit. I liked the action of it, but there is so much of this level that just feels claustrophobic from top to bottom. And, like, I understand that it's supposed to be like a close quarters building and stuff, but I kind of feel like it's a little too claustrophobic for its own damn good. And I really just don't really, I don't mind games that have claustrophobic environments, especially if it's like a horror game or something. Because when it's super claustrophobic, something could just get up in your face and, you know, you'd be like, oh my god, you know, and it kind of hammers home the point of fighting to survive. But a lot of games I find don't really do claustrophobic environments well. They just don't, and it's, I don't know, I never really cared for it too much. Of course, we got the bad guy at the end here. You shoot your way all the way to the top of the business building to meet the man at the top, and I think it's kind of funny how, like, a lot of SNK's villains in their games, they have, like, these really pointy eyebrows and these square ass jaws, and like they always have either like a lab coat or a really slick looking business suit. Like it just kind of screams peak 90s, I think. You know, it's definitely like a peak 80s, peak 90s action film trope, I think. No, man, this ending sequence. So I think that, I think the entire ride for Second Squad is actually pretty good stuff. I do enjoy it. It is a fun game. I think that the weakest portion of it is literally the end sequence. The end fight literally feels so chaotic and so haphazard at times that it kind of stops being fun past a certain point. The rest of the game is great, but the ending for it, like that ending fight, just doesn't really feel really good or anything. You know, like a lot of the artwork is still there, the characters are there. Of course, you have the stereotypical 90s villain with the eye patch and stuff, and you know, the creativity for the boss is there, but it kind of feels like it's overdone to a certain extent. And in many ways, I guess this would be keeping with the theme of what SNK is trying to do. You know, like SNK is like obviously out to make a buck off of this, and you know, that's quite alright, but I kind of feel like in some aspects that they kind of overkilled it with this boss. The presentation is very interesting and stuff, and we've got some interesting animations going on, which weren't really super common for the time and gives the game kind of a high-end feel. But in terms of like how you go about beating the boss and how the boss fight changes as it goes on, it just doesn't really feel super amazing. You know, like if I had to go and rate the boss fight, I would have to say it's like probably a solid D. You know, it's not an F because obviously you can beat it and, you know, it does function, but it's definitely D material, I think. Because it's just like a ton of AoE, and then destroying these compartments with all these guns and stuff inside of them actually makes the boss fight worse. And I discovered that on my first playthrough, so it kind of felt like that I couldn't go and just do a max damage run. So a lot of it was just dodging and rolling and waiting for the main villain to pop around again, so I could just go and, you know, damage the hell out of him. And there was it was past a certain point where I was like, you know, it doesn't really make much sense to go and shoot at him. It would just be better if I compulsively tossed grenades than died, and it just doesn't really feel like a very good way to go about doing a boss fight. You know, like it doesn't really feel enjoyable. I mean, at least with like their other titles like Metal Slug and stuff, you can go and use nades, but your base firearm is still extremely serviceable, even if you're using nothing but a pistol. But with this boss fight, I found that it was basically stereotypical SNK. You have a villain that mocks you and stuff with stereotypical design. But at the same time, my guns don't really feel relevant against him. They don't feel relevant, nor do they feel effective. You know, it just kind of feels like the only way that I could do anything meaningful is just by going and chucking grenades and letting all the flame nades do a ton of damage and stuff. And, you know, this is reflective of the other characters as well. You know, I thought it was just this character that would have this issue for these reasons, but the other characters play very similarly when it comes to going and doing this boss fight, and I didn't really like that too much, you know, like, all of the characters feel like they have unique flavoring until you get to this point, and it's just like a point of going and using the heaviest crap you can find, and then, you know, these assholes show up after you go and destroy most of the pods, and it just kind of feels like an excess, you know, and I didn't really like that too much. So for me, it was just like, okay, we're just going to keep dying and chucking nades and dying and chucking nades, and that was pretty much the path that I had chosen for it. And then to make matters worse with all the stuff going on screen, you start to experience a fair bit of slowdown as well. And so I think that I wish that SNK would have gone and put a little bit more thought into it. Like, the boss fight itself, you know, it does scream, hey, this is epic, but at the same time it also screams, hey, this is pretty goddamn frustrating because we have all of this shit going on screen. You can't really mitigate a lot of it. And then what you do mitigate comes back very, very quickly. It doesn't stay dead. You know, and it just doesn't really, like, the later half of the boss fight really just does not feel good. And so I think, like, when I normally, because I still play this game, obviously, when I normally wrap this portion of the boss fight up, a lot of the time I just kind of exhale. And it's not even like the exhale of, oh, that was great. It's the exhale of, I'm exhausted, you know? And I think that, like, a good boss fight will leave you tired. Like, a good boss fight will leave you getting a run for your money, I think. But they shouldn't, like, be doing it to such an extent where it just kind of starts to become boring past a certain point. So, I mean, everything for this boss fight is there except for, like, a couple of niggling issues, and those niggling issues have a tendency to just kind of go and shit on the rest of the experience. And so I think that while Shock Troopers is definitely a very strong game in that regard, I think that it just kind of falls flat towards the end. And it's just really not that great. Not to me, at least. So other things that Shock Troopers kind of suffers from is really weird localization issues as well. Like, it still has spelling errors and everything else, but this was pretty much every single Japanese game that was being ported over back then. Like, we have to remember that there was really just no sort of dedicated team that typically did this. A lot of the time it was just kind of like a rush job. You know, like executive producer instead of executive producer. And I mean, they're good games, but I would love to see all of these games get redone with just proper stuff, you know. And I know I'm never going to see it, but I would like to, I'd like to wish for it, I think. Planner, sub-planner, chief programmer. In one of the other SNK games, it doesn't even say chief programmer, it just says chief progmer. You know, so like a lot of the spelling in a lot of these games is actually quite bad. But, you know, it is what it is. It's just how it was back then, and they're still fun to play, and, you know, now that I'm older, they're kind of fun to make fun of a little bit. So, this concludes the commentary for Shock Troopers Second Squad. For those that actually came out and shown up, I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate your views and your comments, you know, both good and bad, you know, whatever have you. So, we have only one more video in the commentary line after this, and then we're pretty much done with all of it. You know, I've been working pretty hard on it. I realize that the entire arcade set is going to last a staggering 8 months, and it took about 3 months of constant work to be able to do all this. So I'm really happy that we're finally getting there. So for now, this is going to be it. I greatly appreciate you guys coming out, and as always, until next time, be good to yourself and each other.